Jim Higgins, Professor of Aviation at the University of North Dakota.
Jim, what's going on, man? Welcome back to the Pilot to Pilot podcast and to the State of the Aviation Industry podcast.
Well, always good to be with you, Justin, and always good to talk with your listeners.
Yeah, it's always good to have you on. It's probably one of the most requested things too. You know, it's like, when's Jim coming back on? When's Jim coming back on? It's like, we try, I promise. Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to get schedules going and just a lot going on.
It is.
And there is a lot going on in the aviation world as well. You know, Spirit, since the last time we talked, I don't think they were back in to bankruptcy, but they are back in bankruptcy now. There is some movement with Boeing that we'll touch on where they're going to go from 38 to 42 jets, which, as you said before we started recording, is a really big deal. We're going to talk about hiring. We're going to talk about just some other cool stuff that's going on in the industry, hopefully cool, and also touch on what you're worried about, what you're concerned about. I did ask on Instagram if you had any questions for us, so if we have any time, I will kind of scroll through my phone. So we see my phone, I'm not texting someone. I am actually looking up questions. I promise, Jim. I promise.
Fair enough.
Or I might be texting someone, you never know, but I might fall asleep. Just kidding.
Like my students, Justin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's no different than class, right?
No.
But yeah, so let's start it off right there. I mean, I think the number one topic with everyone right now, probably with your students as well, is they just see the pullback in hiring a little bit. And I say a little bit because on some airlines end, that really isn't the case. I mean, I know hiring has picked back up. What has changed is the pool of applicants that's available. At least that's the way I see it, as a lot of Spirit pilots are kind of not necessarily flooding, but are deciding to jump ship, and there is a pool of highly qualified pilots right there that have already passed 121 training, that already done CQs, that have flown Airbuses, that have flown whatever Spirit's doing, and airlines are kind of like, oh, cool, we'll take them now because they're already qualified, we know they can pass training. Spirit, from what I hear, has pretty tough training, and they do their check rides in a very short amount of simulators.
Four or six sim sessions or something like that. They have a few more extra CPTs, but it's known to be very tough. Spirit pilots are very good hires by 121 carriers.
So if you can pass, if the way airlines look at it, if you can pass Spirit training, you can pass our training. Yeah. And airlines don't want you to fail because that's a lot of money that they're spending, and they want you in there, and they want to make money off you, and they can't do that if you fail their training.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right. Well, let's talk about that hiring then just for a second. So, you know, it depends on how you look at things, right? If you look at things historically, we've actually had 2 decent years. I know it doesn't feel like it because 2 years ago, between 4 and 2 years ago, we had record hiring. We were north of 12,000 pilots hired at the legacies, which we'd never seen before. And we had 2 years in a row of that, right? Which was just crazy. And then last year and the year before, we returned to more of a still historically high number, but it felt a lot less because, you know, the spigots weren't completely turned on like we saw the previous 2 years. Now, I will tell you a couple things. The big uncertainty is the economy, right? I mean, things are looking really good right now. So, you know, I know Delta just came out and they're estimating a very strong year up ahead. I know United's kind of said the same thing. And so that's good. We know the retirements haven't even kicked in mass at some of these carriers. And then on top of that, I know through internal memos at both United and at Delta, and I haven't heard yet on American, but we have heard that at those other two, that they're going to return to the hiring levels we saw a few years ago. So you're going to see probably 3,000 to 4,000 pilots hired at United and at least 3,000 to 4,000 pilots hired at Delta next year. And those are kind of your bellwether. And I don't know about American. I've heard they're going to do a lot of hiring too, but I haven't heard from anyone that's seen any company memos or anything like the others have or any public plans announced. But it would follow suit that they would also do a lot of hiring. And in those big three, and then not to leave out Southwest, not to leave out UPS and all the others, but as those go, we typically see the rest go because that's where a lot of the guys and gals from regionals are pushing towards, you know, and it causes a really nice churn that allows people to move on through their career. So barring some kind of a financial catastrophe world war outbreak, pandemic, etc., it's looking like the next couple of years are going to be very, very good. I don't know if we're going to quite get back to the 12 to 14,000 hired, but certainly we'll have a lot more than what we've seen in the last couple of years, which will be good for everybody. Just one quick point about Spirit. You are right. As the furloughs continue to kick in there, they're in a double bankruptcy, which is very unusual. But as those furloughs kick in there, those pilots are going to get fast-tracked to other carriers for all the reasons you just said. The Spirit training is known to be difficult. I know of people that went to Spirit, didn't get through training there, and they were really good pilots, and they ended up, being sent away. And so if you make it there, you're absolutely in good shape, and the other airlines know that. And so that could cause a little bit of an impact in the hiring, but when you look at the entire hiring picture, it's still not going to take all the slots away. I know some people might be wondering that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it won't take all the slots away. It might make it a little harder for your app to be seen because maybe they're looking for different things, and that changes all the time too, right? What airlines want at certain times is different. They might hire a ton of 121 guys, and maybe either they leave, they go somewhere else, they get a little burned, maybe they don't pass through training, and they're like, all right, well, now we're not going to do a bunch of 121 guys. Now we're going to focus on some corporate guys, and now they're going to focus on military. So they definitely have different periods. The only thing that you can really do is just keep updating your application and make sure it's fresh. Make sure that when there are eyes on it, it is something that they want to hit submit. Because sometimes the hardest part is just getting your application in front of their eyes to see, to hit all right, proceed to the next step.
That's right.
And that's where you can get with any kind of recruiting coaches or any kind of those programs. They can help you make sure your resume is perfect because, I know when I was applying, I applied to Delta and American. I remember Delta, they're like, if you use Delta and Airlines as two words, you will not get hired.
That's a big
deal.
You
have to do Delta Airlines.
It's a big deal. Okay. Same with Alaska Air. It's their airline. They can call it what they want, right? So, to your point about putting your best foot forward, that's absolutely important. I too am a big believer in a lot of these services that are out there. Everyone kind of has their favorites. I don't particularly have favorites. I've heard good things about most of them. It's well worth it. It might be several $100s depending on what you have them do. But I know when my wife went to work at her airline, she sat down with one of them and they went through everything. And I'm not saying it made all the difference in the world, but it was shortly after they did a review of her, at the time, airline apps and a review of her resume. It was shortly after that she got called by the airline she works at now, and then also Delta, which she didn't work out for an interview. So is it a coincidence? I don't know. She certainly was qualified, but all that being said, I think that really helps. And there will be good opportunities down the road for all these carriers, and there's going to be lots of paths. So I think that's very important.
What's the overall vibe with your students? Because when I talk to people that are either in training or looking for jobs or even a CFI, they seem a little bit down because when they got in the training, they were promised that this is going to happen forever, right? The shortage is here. It's not going to slow down. This is how it is. And when you've been in the industry, you know that you don't ever kind of listen to forevers or this is going to happen in 1 month. You kind of have a realistic view, like, all right, they say 1 month, it's probably going to be 6 months. If they say forever, it's going to be 2 years. The timelines can differ, but you don't want to hold on to those words because they are trying to recruit you. They are trying to get you to come to this airline and they want to make it sound as good. And in the moment, that is what it is. They are upgrades in 18 months, but that can change. It's all fluid. But there was this kind of like this promise, that they see all their buddies go, maybe they even skip the regionals, go straight to United. Maybe they are at a regional for a year, then they move on to Delta, and now there's a little bit of stagnation and it's harder to get a CFI job when that happens. It's harder to get low time pilot jobs that happens because like you said, the natural progression of when people get hired, it opens up other jobs isn't happening as much anymore. That's
right. And I will tell you amongst the colleges, and I'm assuming it's the same way in other places. There has been a oversaturation of incoming students, which is good, but they've flooded the capacity. But we're also not seeing the instructors hired that we used to before. For instance, at UND, I think they hired, don't quote me on this, but something about 120 instructors this year, or I'm sorry, 80 instructors this year, and they had 150, 160 apply. So they're batting about 50%. And I know it's the same at other colleges as well, and that's very unusual because 2 years ago, I'm not going to say we hired everybody that applied, but you had a very good chance of getting hired as a CFI here, and that was the same everywhere. So you're right, they are feeling it downstream. Look, to your point. It's 100% correct. I've said this before on this podcast, that whenever times are really, really good and everyone's getting hired, all of a sudden people think this is the way it's going to be forever. And then whenever there are people furloughed and no one's getting hired and it looks like it's going to, people say this is how it's going to be forever. And you and I both know, because we've been in the industry long enough, that the only thing constant, sorry to borrow cliche, but is the change. It's just going to change. Yeah. And we're seeing it live out just in the last 5 years. We've seen a little microcosm of that. We've gone from before the pandemic, this unbelievable ramp up the hiring, to like boom, potential furloughs and no hiring for a while, and then boom, back into this kind of medium upswing, and then to where we're looking at hiring a lot. But then you have a carrier like Spirit that's furloughing, so you're kind of seeing the whole basket of outcomes in a short period of time. And this is a little bit more like what it used to be in the 80s, 90s, and later, I know your dad was in flying. My dad was an airline pilot too. And, he started out at Northwest, ended up Continental, then to UPS, and he retired now. But when you look back at his career, I've mentioned this before, but about a third of it was spent on furlough, on strike, just looking for a job. So At least it's not back to that. You know what I mean? I mean, we're still not seeing a complete stability, but it's a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah. And it's crazy how, one airline can really be struggling when not everyone else, when the majority of other airlines are having the best finances they've ever had. And it just, I mean, I know it does come down to the type of company you are and who you're serving and how you're running that. But it just seems like right now, I mean, I brought that up because you mentioned the furloughs, because we do have an airline that's furloughing, and it's awful. Never want to see it. But yeah, it's insane. This industry, there's nothing like it. I mean, at least I haven't found anything that is like it. But it's just, you got to be along for the ride. And when you think, just kind of have some perspective too, because if you think it's bad now, you have no idea what it was like with the lost generation. And I'm not trying to minimize the situation that you're going in, but I mean, 9/11, and then you had a financial crisis. I have flown with people that were furloughed for 12 years. They're like, I was furloughed for 12 years. It took me 12 years to get a call back. Yeah.
And there's some airlines that have double furloughees. They got furloughed, got called back, and then a year or two later got furloughed again.
Peace.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a rough
I don't mean to laugh, but I don't know what else to do when you say that. It's just like, oh man, it's insane. So it does seem like it's different than what it was 2 years ago, and that is unfair. I do hear you, but it is going to be a job that you can still have a very successful career in. You're going to get hired. It's going to work out. And I also do want to say, a lot of times when you get hired in the moments when the industry doesn't look like it's doing the best, those turn out to be the best times to be hired. My buddy, when he was getting hired in COVID, it was like, oh dude, I don't know if you want to go there. Like everyone's like, what are the airlines going to be like? What are things going to look like? And then he finds out he can upgrade in 2 years. Now he's a Delta captain, and he's making a ton of money, and he's got great seniority, and it was the perfect time for him to be hired. He
wasn't the moonshot captain at Delta that was like age 24.
No, he was not. He's probably listening to this. He's like, how dare you compare me?
Sorry. Well, I mean, I guess that guy did quite well. I mean, but to that point, if you go back to our very first podcast that we did together, it was during the beginning and crux of COVID. If you recall, you and I discussed this, and I even went as far, people maybe thought it was a little bit nuts. You didn't think it was nuts, but I said, actually, now is a pretty good time to come into the industry, because it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to train. The COVID stuff should be done by then, which it turned out it was actually done maybe in 2.5, 3 years. So we were, if anything, I overestimated the impact, not by much. But the point is, those people that came in 19, 20, 21, they timed it perfectly. But when you first came into the industry, like no one was hiring because we were shut down in a pandemic during that time. But now look at them. They've absolutely followed that trajectory that you mentioned. And so, what we know is, in statistics, we call it everything regresses to its mean. We do know that we will get these variances, these perturbances, these disruptions, but over time, you'll just like a smooth S&P fund index, over time you can smooth it out. It just always seems to rise, and little variations here and there, but overall the trend is positive, and there's no reason not to believe that. We've overcome everything. We've overcome 9/11, we've overcome the Great Recession. We actually had a bird flu pandemic between 01 and 08 that actually disrupted traffic, and we overcame that. We overcame COVID. I mean, what we've learned is is the industry is pretty resilient. It doesn't mean that people aren't having pain like we see at Spirit. And just as an aside, and I know I've been kind of vicious on Spirit management, maybe vicious too strong. I've been kind of hard on Spirit management, but I mean, come on. They were losing money when everyone else was making money. And the only people that you can blame for that, I'm sorry, squarely, is the management team there. And they've really let their people down. And the other thing that this is, I have a union background, so this is kind of easy. But the other thing that greatly bothers me there is, they went through this bankruptcy stuff. And the first round, and they arranged their debtor in possession, their DIP financing, which is we've seen in the past. But then they all paid themselves, the management paid themselves pretty good bonuses there. And then now we're going right into a second furlough, and so I mean it's like what now? Some people will say, when there's turbulent times, who do you want running your operation? Do you want Michael Jordan, or do you want the person who's willing to do it for the cheapest amount of pay? And I get that a little bit, but keep in mind, this was pretty much the same management team that got them to where they were. So I'm not trying to be mean, but it wasn't Michael Jordan running their airline, if you know what I mean. It was whoever it was. And the other thing we've talked about this once before, and as the low-cost carrier business model been exposed, right? And certainly in the case of Spirit, you can say yes, but there are low-cost carriers that are doing just fine. Frontier and Allegiant. Now, Frontier has slowed its growth a little bit, but it's still growing. Allegiant's doing fine financially. So, there are companies that have figured it out. I know that Scott Kirby's been out there saying the low-cost business model is broken.
Man, yeah,
and
very vocal.
Yeah, and it's interesting for him to say that. That hasn't been proven yet. Yes, in the case of Spirit, but that could have just been a management problem or just some other external factor. But these companies, I don't think the model's been exposed at all. But we'll see. I mean, time will tell for sure.
Excuse me. Something stuck in my throat.
I mean, to choke you up on that.
Yeah, right. You're crying now. I don't know if the model has been exposed per se, but I do think the bigger airlines have figured out how to take some of their customers. And I think it exposed weaknesses in the model. And I think only certain airlines were prepared for those weaknesses, or they were prepared better than some of the airlines. Now, can the bigger carriers, can they find a way to get more customers and really kind of hurt the other low-cost carriers? Maybe, but I agree with you where I don't think the low-cost carrier model is completely exposed and completely done with, but I do think that, the big airlines, they kind of figured it out, and now they're kind of teetering like, all right, well, premium is really hot right now. It's like, how far do we dive in the premium bucket versus how far do we try to take any more of these customers? Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting kind of question that they have. And one thing about Spirit too, and this isn't bashing them at all. It's just the cyclical nature, which we talked about in hiring, also is with companies as well. There wasn't too long ago when Delta wasn't doing great. It wasn't too long ago when every article you read about United was terrible press. It was dragging people off airplanes, or it was just unfortunate things. And now you look at United and everything that you're reading is like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest airline ever. You look at Delta's profit and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest airline ever. So everything is cyclical, and everything, like you said, reverts to the mean. They're going to be up here, then they're going to go down, then they're all going to kind of come back. And the top three, and I don't know as much about Southwest of the history, but in what they're going through is wild as well. But the top three plus Southwest will say so. And they all kind of go up and down, but they seem to ride the same line over. I agree. You look at it for like a 50-year period. Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. We have absolutely seen what I would call a cross-pollination of business models. So you've seen the legacy carriers, what you've really seen is they now offer this basic economy product, which, there's no prearranged seats. There's, you have to pay baggage fees. It's very tantamount and similar to what we see on the low-cost carriers. So United, Delta, American, they now compete, like you said, by offering this lowest piece, and then, like you said, they also have done very well with the premium products. And if you look at some of the low-cost carriers, they're starting to move into premium a little bit as well. So you're seeing this cross-pollination of that. One quick note about Southwest, my big thing on Southwest is, they're a juggernaut airline. They've done really well. And, about 3-4 years ago, they started running into operational problems. The big question mark on Southwest from an investor point of view has always been, okay, they dominate domestically. They've got their business model dialed in.
but they don't really do much internationally. South America, Caribbean, Canada, stuff like that's fine. There's, looking at Hawaii, some European stuff. But, what about Asia? What about Australia? What about the rest of the world? But, they always seem to find a way to continue to expand. Just this last month, I don't know if you caught that, but they're going to Alaska now. That's new for Southwest. Yeah, that's a new one for Southwest. So they're always finding new ways to get more market share. And, again, you hate to think of it like this. It's what we call an airline death. If for some reason Spirit doesn't emerge from this second bankruptcy, or its days are limited, that capacity will be soaked up by airlines like, all the ones we've talked about, but Southwest and United and American and Delta, it really will. And one last point, you brought it up about Delta. Delta has just been killing it on profitability, and they just came out, as you noticed, with a new guidance on it. And I mean, they're making more money than we've ever seen an airline make. So props to them. You're absolutely right. Everything's functioning very well there. Their optimization on the revenue management is unlike anything I've seen. They control their fuel with their own refinery. I mean, they've really got this thing dialed in. It's taken years to learn how to do it, but they really do seem to do it. It's not to say the other airlines haven't figured it out, but there's just no doubt right now today, in terms of just profitability, not looking at anything else, United's really got it dialed in, and it's looking good for them.
Yeah, and I mean, just because it's working today doesn't mean it's going to work in 5 years.
Amen,
right?
brother.
So you never know. Yeah, you never know. I do have a question. I was looking on my phone. Someone brought up a very, it's very out there right now. The government shutdown that really, really affects aviation. What's government contracted, or what's under the government? Controllers.
Yeah.
Unhappy controllers calling out sick. Pretty sure that's what stopped the last one, from what I've been reading, is that there's a lot of pressure because no one went to work. And if we don't have our airlines operating, our GDP suffers considerably. And the way the country works just does not work as well. And so we need airlines, we need people in there. So what are your thoughts on the government shutdown and what it means for aviation and aviation safety? Yeah,
great question. As you know, airlines touch anywhere from estimated 10% of our GDP. It's responsible for 10 because it transports, logistics, whatnot. Some have that number as high as 15%, depending on what study you look at. So when it's disrupted, it absolutely hurts the global, or not just the United States economy, the global economy. So you're right. So the shutdown, the ATC system is already stressed because they don't have enough controllers. They have to retire at 55, I think. It can take up to 3 years. I just saw the numbers the other day. It can take up to 3 years to get fully position qualified in a route center. Tower can take up to, a year and a half. That's before that. And by fully position qualified, that means you're allowed to be on your own as a controller and not have a supervisor. If you've ever been flying and you hear the second voice come over the top of the first, that's a person that's not
don't
yet.
Don't do that. Don't turn.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of that's going on. So it takes about as long to hatch a full-blown controller as it does a pilot, which we all know is a long period of time. So this problem's not going away anytime soon. And now when you add to it the government shutdown, which of course controllers are exempt from that. I do have friends in the FAA that are not. And because I do a lot of research with the FAA, what'll happen is during a shutdown, and unfortunately we have a lot of experience with this now, we'll get a message from our FAA contacts saying, look, I have not been designated as safety critical. Therefore, after this date, if the government shut down, I cannot respond to your texts. I cannot respond to your emails. I cannot respond to anything. And that does have an effect on certain positions if your position's not deemed safety critical. Now, the air traffic controllers are deemed safety critical, but there's still some secondary and periphery effects, some of their support staff, some of the other things. And what happens is their job workload increases because some of the things that they normally didn't necessarily have to do or they had support for, that goes away. And so it doesn't take much in an already stressed situation, whether it's a few key people calling in sick, whatever the case may be, it doesn't take much to upset the system. And so the government shutdown certainly is affecting this. And I think there's been a lot of articles in the last few days about how much it's affecting it. I don't know about any specific like sick actions or whatever, but I can tell you it's already a stress situation and there's no way that this shutdown helps it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Burbank. I think Burbank was like, hey, guys, we're not going to have a controller from this time to this time in the middle of the night. I don't want to say airports, but I think there's one in Tennessee. I don't know if it was Nashville, was having issues as well. I mean, and then you look at airports that already have issues like Newark. I mean, this just makes it even worse. And it's just really unfortunate. And then it goes past kind of the work itself. It goes also to the psychological effects of it. You're not getting paid for a very high stress job where you just mentioned you are doing more. And I'm sure after a while, you're just like, a pilot makes a mistake. You're just like, what am I doing this for? Like, why am I here? I can't pay my bills with this because I'm not getting paid to do this right now. And I'm just supposed to hope that my paycheck comes. And if I miss a payment on my loan, or my mortgage, whatever it is, you just hope that they understand that I'm a government employee and I haven't been paid. So it's going to be okay. I mean, there's only so much that a pizza can do to raise morale, when people buy them pizzas. It's just, you want to see it stopped. You want to see it ended because you want to see them get paid, and you want to just have the safest and the best system in the background, and highly paid, highly motivated people to work is going to do that. And with a shutdown, it's hard to have highly motivated, highly paid people because they're not getting paid.
Right. No, well said. I mean, irrespective of one's politics, I think we can all come down pretty hard on the political system for letting the government shut down yet again. The fact that we can't get this worked out in this day and age is ridiculous. I don't even care who's right. I just care what's right. The old CRM idea. Don't focus on who, focus on what. And right now, you're absolutely right. I mean, just case in point. Here's a case in point. If a controller right now if they want to fill out an ATSAP, which is equivalent to a pilot's ASAP, a reporting program that, gives you some immunity, helps the safety system, increase, that the vendors that handle that, they can still fill it out, and presumably their protections will still be there. But it's not being processed right now because the contractors and the folks that do that aren't doing it right now, right? And so those go into a holding. So let's say you had an altitude incident, right? And these are just as big a deals for controllers as they are for pilots, right? These in some cases, if a controller gets too many of these things, they call them deals. If they get too many deals, it can mean that they go to remedial training, they have to requalify, or it can even mean, termination. And so, a pilot has an altitude deviation. As long as no one gets hurt, you fill out your ASAP, get it turned in, get blessed by your event review committee, and you move on. That doesn't exist right now. And that's just for the controllers. And that's just one example of some of these support systems that aren't available right now. I mean, I've even heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, just think about this. It's going to sound kind of silly, but the cleaning crews for the towers and all that. So now you're working. I mean, I know it sounds like a minor thing, but it's cumulative. You can't do safety reports. Now your work area is going to be a trash. No one's vacuuming, I mean, now are you going to vacuum? I mean, there's a vacuum in the closet. I mean, and all these weird things, and multiply it by probably 10 or 20 other little variables. And it absolutely makes it a very difficult work situation.
What does this mean? I mean, this has been thrown around. This word that I'm about to say has been brought up before. There's been thoughts of it, but it almost seems like in these situations, maybe it's not a bad idea for the privatization of ATC. Maybe it can protect jobs. Maybe it can make sure they're well paid. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of other arguments to it as well, but at the very least, if this can ensure that they are going to have a job during a government shutdown and that things won't stop working and it won't kind of degrade in the Swiss cheese model of safety, is it worth it to pursue it? Is it worth it to look at it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Well,
privatization, of course, that issue's been around for a while. We have some great examples of it in the world, with Canada being one of the biggest ones when they went to NAV Canada. There's pros and cons likely. And the other thing that there's just a lot of unknown. Canada's one thing. When they went to privatization, you can look at that and say there's an example. But the truth is there's nowhere else in the world that has the traffic system and the capacity and the number of operations that we do. And, you could probably combine all the others and they won't come close to us. If you look at a map anytime on FlightAware or whatever, we're a beehive, right? And other places just have little trickles relative to what we see here. There's certainly some exceptions to that, but so when we say, well, we should do what they've done elsewhere, you are probably comparing apples to oranges. But that being said, it still may be the best thing. But here's my question for you, and this is no knock on my friends in the FAA. In order to pull this off, there's going to be a lot of unforeseen outcomes and, things that happen with it. And we saw what happened with NextGen, and we've seen what's happened with UAS integration. It just hasn't gone well. And so now if we told ATC that you have to privatize, I really think it sounds good on paper. I mean, it makes a lot of sense in some areas, but it's just the sausage making. I'm worried of what's going to happen during the sausage making. It's like really bad right now they're having really bad taxiway construction in Chicago. And so, like, I don't know if you've seen an ADS or an ASDX printout of what's going on there, but it's phenomenally backed up. I mean, you're looking at minimum, in some cases, 2-hour taxis just to get, from one apron gate to another. It's really bad. So I would say the same thing is going to happen during the privatization piece. And then the last piece is the user fees. When it does privatize, the only way to really support that is through full-blown user fees, which is fine. And the airlines have been after this for years because they feel they pay a disproportionate amount. But that would have a pretty significant effect on general aviation. You could probably see, I mean, I've seen estimates that go as high as $20 a flight hour. So if you're paying $150 for your Cessna 172 for training and $50 for your instructor, you could probably add on another $20. I mean, it would add up is the thing. And so the question is what would happen to our infrastructure for building new pilots? I mean, my guess is the universities would probably figure out how to absorb it. The large flight schools would probably be okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know about the mom pop FBOs and whatnot. It could be, I worry about that. So short answer is I don't know, Justin. I've gone both ways in the past. I've been on pro-privatization and I've been against it. Right now today, my biggest concern is I don't know that we could pull it off without a lot of pain. Even if it is a better system, I don't know if we can pull it off. Yeah.
I mean, anytime you change things, there's going to be some kind of pain. And in aviation, unfortunately, that pain can mean lives. That pain can mean a lot of bad things.
It sure
can. Some things it's like, oh, we just lost this one document. Oh, no. But no, this is very real and very much about lives. It is interesting you bring up the fact of user utilization. Like, I mean, does that mean if I'm flying my airplane, I'm like, hey, November 524 Bravo Whiskey, I'd like to pick up flight following. They enter in my tail number. They're like, oh, well, it looks like you are out of credits.
Yeah, right.
So we can take a credit card over the phone, or if you want, you can just put your fingerprint on your Garmin.
There's an app for that. Right.
Yeah, but it is very interesting to think about the cost and will it mean more people are going to be flying VFR with no flight following? Because you'd imagine that would be fine.
So think about this for a second. I do not want to hijack the podcast, but there's a really interesting issue developing in this area, user fees. I don't know if you've been following this, but there's some airports around the country for general aviation that have started using ADS-B data to automatically charge pilots. And so pilots, they'll charge it on the number of landings. There's some other airports that use just cameras and they can use AI to take a look at your in number, and then they'll send you, they'll go to the registration on record for that. And so by the way, AOPA really opposes that because, ADS-B was supposed, the theory behind ADS-B is it was there for safety and for traffic avoidance and whatnot. It wasn't necessarily ever designed for user fees. But on the other side of that, just to provide some counterbalance, on the other side of that, some of these smaller airports, they need funds to, pave the taxiways. Yeah. They need funds to do the ramp. So I don't know. The government trust fund only goes so far for a lot of these infrastructure improvements. And so, yeah, I mean, there's probably going to have to be a happy medium there, but I get it. We're one of the few countries where they call it the freedom to fly. I mean, right now, Justin, if you don't violate airspace, I suppose you could go out in a lawn chair and some balloons and get airborne. And as long as you go through the experimental process, someone will probably sign off on that. Maybe, other country in the world that you could do that in. Tomorrow you could go build your own airplane from scratch and, prove that you built it yourself, slap experimental on there and, go fly it. Nowhere else can you do that. And so this freedom to fly is a pretty important thing. And so whenever things interfere with that, you just, I'm not giving any answers because I don't have the answers, but it's just something that has to be really balanced all around for everybody.
Moving on a little bit, we did mention that Boeing is going to produce more airplanes, which is big news because when you're limited at 38 and the FAA says, hey, this is your hard stop, we don't trust anything over this number. When you finally announce that you can do more, it has to signal that there's confidence between the FAA and what is going on and what they're seeing, and they have to like what they're seeing. Yeah. So I don't know if it's going to be an immediate, hey, we're back to normal, everything's going to be certified. But it definitely signals things are moving in the right way.
No, I agree. So for those that don't know, during this whole 737 MAX and, Boeing, whatever word you want to call for it, when the FAA slapped basically limits on the amount of production, in particular for the 737s, they said they were limited to 38 for a long time, and that was for quality control reasons. Just in this last month, Boeing put out 42, which means then that they've somehow gotten permission to put out more. And now the latest guidance is that they're going to try to get into the 70, or their goal is in the 60s, maybe even the 70s per month. And so that would be really good for the airlines, right? Ironically, and I'm not a conspiracy person at all, but I just read on October 7th, so just a few days, or yesterday, as per this podcast, Airbus overtook the A320 overtook the 737 with 12,000 and some odd number, and Airbus right now is producing more A320s per month. They're doing 50 plus or minus 10 a month right now, so they are doing a few more a month. But their goal for next year is to go over 100 a month. And Boeing doesn't have that. So it looks like for the foreseeable future, Airbus is going to stay ahead in terms of deliveries. So what is interesting to me is Airbus overtook Boeing, and now Boeing's allowed to produce more aircraft. I'm not saying there's a nexus there, but it is kind of interesting that, it's always kind of been a source of pride between the two manufacturers. What's the most popular, the 73 or the A320? And, it looks like it's going to be the A320 for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And then also, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about with hiring. If Boeing is able to produce more airplanes, that's going to be more pilots that need to fly those airplanes. And if you've been following along, a lot of the kind of so-called pullback in the pilot shortage or pullback in the hiring has been the fact that we don't have airplanes to fly.
That's right.
There isn't a mass amount. The whole industry needs more airplanes. They need airplanes at every single airline, and engines too. That's another issue. But there just isn't the planes to put the pilots in to fly the people that want to go fly. So the more Boeing can get going, and the more you hear Delta, United, American say, hey, we're going to start hiring more, it's probably because Boeing's like, hey guys, we're going to have our airplanes built soon.
That's right.
You're going to be getting your airplanes you ordered a while ago. They're going to be showing up soon. So prepare, because when you hired, they're not hiring you for that moment. They're hiring you for the next 6 to 9 months, and they're trying to project what they're going to be doing in 6 to 9 months.
That's right. The airlines have been caught flat-footed before by not staying ahead of the hiring curves, no doubt about it. And all the major CEOs have said they expect the Boeing deliveries to return to a near normal, so they are basing their hiring plans on that. But it doesn't take a mathematician to figure this out. There's a backlog of firm orders for the 737 across all models of about 725, plus options of about the same. So if you're only doing, 40 a month, 45 a month, you can see you're years away at this current production level, and even if they get to their goal of 60 a month, you're still probably a couple of years out or a year and a half out. So, it's going to take a while, and that's if people don't exercise their options, and that, so, business is good if they can execute on their quality control.
That's so much money. When you think about like 700 times 100 million or whatever it is to buy 737. Then you get into I honestly have no idea what a 737 costs. So we'll call it 80, 90 million.
Yeah, I think more, that's right.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows? Someone's going to mess you like, it's actually 130 million since inflation, but whatever it is, it's an insane amount of money. You're moving into billions, and then you're moving into like trillions if they have to fulfill every single one of those orders, which just cannot compute.
Astronomical amount of money. And the price for me and you, if you and I go and try to buy a 737, it's going to be a lot different than if American goes to try to buy it. So it will be lower. And my guess is it's different based on the number of firm orders and, timelines and whatnot. If you want them sooner, you're probably going to have to pay more, right? So the airlines didn't necessarily learn ancillary revenue strategies from they've learned it a lot from places like Boeing. We're like, oh, you want to move up in the line? Sure. We can get you moved up in the line for an extra 10 million or whatever the case may be.
It'll be interesting because I'm sure there have been some deals through this kind of downturn of what Boeing has had. I'm sure they're like, hey, please stick with us. If this takes X amount of every month this takes, we'll take off the bottom or the top end, the deal, we'll say. And then as time comes, maybe they're going to try to get that money back. Be like, all right, well, hey, we actually have them in front of you. So if you want to get this plane, then if we go back to our original deal, we'll make sure you have them when you got them.
That's right.
So it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. That went on. There is no doubt that when Boeing was in the crux of its problems, and, the CEOs were visiting the factory there of the major airlines, there's absolutely no doubt that they were, what word do I want to use? Leveraging for the best possible deal for these things. There's no doubt they got really, really good deals. The other thing that happened is there were some airlines during COVID that, and even after that, decided they couldn't take the 737 or the Airbus, and so they sold those off to places like United and Delta, and they were plenty ready to take those slots.
We kind of mentioned Spirit a little bit, but and you don't have to go into like in-depth details, but do you think Spirit makes it out of this bankruptcy? Or if they do make it out of this bankruptcy, do you give them a chance to actually continue as a profitable airline in the future?
Tough question. I really hate to say this. When you go into that double bankruptcy, well, this will be what we need to see. Okay, so they went into bankruptcy the first time. We've seen this before. They found some financing. It's called first position financing or superior debt, and so there's companies that specialize in that, right? And so they put together a debtor in possession financing package, convinced a bankruptcy court that they'll be able to emerge and make profitability. That happened, back at the beginning of the year. Well, obviously, it didn't work out, right? We know that Spirit hasn't made the money they thought they would. In fact, they're still losing money. So now they've re-entered bankruptcy, which is pretty unusual. Now, a couple things, there's 3 outcomes. They're able to find a new financier. It could be the same company from before that just has more stringent terms that are trying to double down and protect their investment. That's possible. But the creditors, the people that are owed money for the aircraft, the engines, ground equipment, whatever, they may say, boy, I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they have a viable plan. And they could try to petition the court to force liquidation so they at least recover some of their assets. And I hate to say this to those of you that work at Spirit or those of you who rely on Spirit, I do think that that's a very real possibility. Or the bankruptcy court could also just say, the trustee that's looking this over saying, I don't see a viable plan here, a viable path forward. Generally speaking, the philosophy in business bankruptcy courts is if the company will put together a plan, Chapter 11, this is how we're going to emerge. This is how we're going to be successful. And generally speaking, the trustees and the bankruptcy courts, because they want to protect the shareholders, they want to protect the employees and everyone else that's interested, they'll give them a pretty big benefit of the doubt. And they certainly got that in the first bankruptcy. I don't know how big of a doubt they're going to get on the second bankruptcy. So I don't know. We'll know soon, though, because if they're forced into a Chapter 7, that's going to be announced soon because either the creditor committee or the secured creditor committee, or they just couldn't find financing to emerge. We'll probably know in the next month or two, if not sooner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
dang,
probably.
That's fast, yeah.
But if they are able to emerge, to your second question is, what's their long-term viability? Look, they have to figure out what the problem is. Their pilots aren't the highest paid pilots. Their flight attendants are not the highest paid flight attendants. They have relatively fuel-efficient aircraft. So something, and they're not figuring it out like Frontier's figuring it out and some of the others. So something's wrong with their management, in my opinion. I'm sorry to keep going back to that. In my opinion, if they emerge, their only real chance is to get some competent management in there that understands business plans, because clearly their business model, at least the way they're executing it with their current management, is not working. And that's also going to work against them. My guess is one of the pieces of emerging from bankruptcy is going to be some type of control from the fine. If somebody comes in and says, okay, we're going to give you $20 million to emerge from bankruptcy, but this is what we're going to need. My guess is they're going to have to cede some operational control. And that means they're going to bring in some experts from other carriers to maybe run it. And that, quite frankly, could be a good thing. Again, I hate to keep beating up on Spirit management, but they've already had a few chances, and there's a lot of families out there that need that paycheck, and a lot of customers out there that need to go from point A to point B, and there's a lot of shareholders out there that have invested pretty hard-earned money, in those carriers. And so, I'm dubious that if they keep doing the same thing over and over again, that they'll ever be successful.
With the mergers that were proposed, right? So obviously it was Spirit Frontier at first, and JetBlue kind of came in and was like, nah, we're going to take them. If either one of those would have gone through, do you think Spirit and their assets and what they did would have brought kind of the value down? Because it did seem like it was just like a train headed down, right? Like it seemed like it was like a train out of control, that we can look at back now. Or do you think that what you said, they just need change, they need to figure out what's wrong? If JetBlue or Frontier would have been able to go through with the purchase, they would have been able to be like, all right, we're actually going to fully make it Frontier, and we're going to operate how Frontier operates, and we're just going to make money that way. Mm-hmm. Same thing with JetBlue.
Yeah, great question. Time-honored tradition in the airlines. We've seen it before. The fastest way to decrease unit cost and increase profitability is to merge, is to become bigger, because when you can become bigger, you get the economies of density, economies of scope, economies of scale, all the things you learn about in MBA economics class. So there's no doubt about that. The one caveat on that is the merger has to go well, has to be managed well. But, the people that lose their jobs in a merger are almost always middle management and upper management, because you don't need 2 directors of safety, for instance. You don't need 2 directors of SOC. You just don't. And so as long as that process would have worked, I certainly believe if one of those mergers was allowed to have gone through, that Spirit probably wouldn't be bankrupt. They still might have had to furlough or right size. Certainly a lot of middle management people would have lost their jobs in that. There'll be, it really depends who the surviving carrier is, but there would be people from both sides that would have had to go. My guess is they would not be bankrupt at this point in time, because, they would be able to because you're bigger now and you can offset your losses with other parts of the operation. Probably still wouldn't have been, it certainly wouldn't have been a Delta, like a profitability juggernaut,
right.
But I don't think they would have been in bankruptcy. No, I still, you and I've talked about it. I still think the judge that thought he was doing a solid for the passengers out there, I wonder if he ever reads that decision that he made. He goes back and thinks, man, maybe I shouldn't have interfered. Maybe as a federal judge, I shouldn't have thought I knew better than all these airline professionals that were trying to.
He had that famous line too, wasn't it? Like, this is for all the Spirit flyers.
Yeah.
Like, this is for you.
That's what he said. Did him a solid, he said.
And kind of going off that statement right there, not necessarily what he said, but just the fact that they did say no to a merger. Do you think that then makes it very, I don't know how to phrase this. Let's say there's another merger that's being proposed. Do you think that maybe the person that's on the judge for that is going to be like, all right, well, I don't really know if I can say no, because last time someone said no, they're going to go out of business. So
here's the thing that has to happen first. The DOJ has to basically say you can't do it, and then the companies either have to sue or the DOJ has to sue to stop it, right? And that's when it makes it to the judges. So under the current environment, under the Trump administration, there clearly is a business-friendly environment. For instance, some of the refund rules that were in existence under the previous administration, where if you had like a 3-hour delay, you had to receive your refund in cash within 7 to 14 days or whatever. There was rules of that. Those are all being paused or being reversed. So we are seeing a very airline management friendly maneuvering right now. So because of that, I would tend to think that, to your question, if a new merger was proposed, my guess is, given the current administration, it's unlikely that DOJ would sue to stop it. So it may never get to the judge. The DOJ may step in and say, well, you have to make these adjustments so you don't oversaturate a market. And, they're always looking, as we've talked about before, they're supposed to look at the effect on the consumers. Would this merger make ticket prices go up, go down, stay the same? And if they determine in some markets, it'll be one surviving carrier, so they'll be free to charge whatever, they may say you have to give up some slots there, or you can only operate X number of flights, or whatever. So you might see some of that, but I think the merger would probably, by and large, be allowed to go through with someone like that. Now, if you had a mega merger between a United and a Delta, American, whatever, probably not. But if you're talking about Spirit and JetBlue, the problem is every time one of these companies goes for a merger, it costs them a lot. It costs them a lot with their shareholders, but it also costs them a lot logistically, because they have to pull about a third of their management teams off to just work on the merger, the potential for the merger, how it would work and what the plan would be. And so there's a risk. There's an opportunity cost risk with doing that. So it's always tough. I know we're running out of time here. We could always talk forever, but I do kind of have one question, which is kind of crazy to think about, but negotiations are going to start up again, right? So I think Delta end of next year maybe, and then everyone else kind of follows about 6 months after that. But early negotiations are starting. Now I don't know if we can see way more hard money, right? So I don't know how much the pay rates are going to skyrocket like they did previously. Now there's probably room for cover for inflation. There's probably maybe a little bit extra, but I don't see 20%, 30%, whatever it was that we saw over 4 years. What do you think is going to be a hot topic? You've done negotiations a lot. You've been in charge. You've kind of known what pilots want, but when the money is to a point where most people are comfortable, is there always just that crowd that's like, we need more money, we need more money? That's or FedEx. Do you start getting, or do you start getting more quality life centric? Or do you start getting more hey, this is actually really annoying when you schedule us like this. If we do schedule this trip, you have to pay us X amount this way. Kind of talk about what goes on when the money is finally really good. What is the thought process of,
negotiating teams and the pilots themselves and even companies?
So great question. Historically, the rule of thumb from a union negotiator perspective and just from a labor perspective in general is when times are good economically, pilots typically go for the money. They go for the bank account that day. When times are bad or in concessionary times, typically pilots will go for more longer term job security provisions like anti-furlough or furlough protection, anti-furlough, retiree benefits, bolstering, certain work rules that maybe are a little bit less onerous on the money the company has to put. So you go for scope is a classic one. You really like, okay, you can't pay us the money now. We're going to really scope this out then because that's something you can do, they'll say. So that's the general rule of thumb. Now, it's interesting because you say, well, I don't know if you saw the news. It was you keep track of the news better than I do. I think it was last week or the week before. The average pilot now makes more than the average physician. Yeah, in the United States. That's unusual. It used to never be that way. And so to your question, is it enough? I don't know. Remember, we've talked about this too. Pilots are remunerated based upon the amount of revenue that they generate for their company. And so when you have record profitability, think about what a long haul pilot's going to make for the company on a 777 between Atlanta and Narita. That's a lot of revenue just coming in on that one flight. And so if we're paid based on the revenue we produce, and by the way, Delta saying they have record profits, everyone's like, wow, that's great. Yeah. You know who else is listening? The negotiating team and the pilots. Yeah. They absolutely are. So I would love to be a negotiator in those times. But to your point, I do think, and you don't hear this too often in the industry, and some people disagree with this, I do think pilots are generally pretty happy with their pay. So I do think you will see another, even though it's boom, it's good economic conditions, and typically you go for more pay. I do think, to your point, you're going to see a lot of work lifestyle improvements, and you're going to start seeing work rules that will, hopefully impact in a good way. Maybe you go for commuting. By the way, that is, these safe commuting things is one thing, but some pilots for years have been after positive space commuting. Mm-hmm. But that's really a difficult issue for the pilot group, because the side that doesn't commute, which is about half of us commute, half of us don't. The side that lives in base or can drive to work, they're like, well, why should I give up anything for the commuters who they say made a choice? Now, did they make a choice to live where they want? That's a debate you'll hear in crew rooms, many times over. I don't know, but when you do decide to live in a place that's not in base, then, should the other pilots give up something in negotiations so that you have positive space? Also, there could be a business impact. So we saw that at some of the last negotiations, and, the union was pretty split on that because they weren't really sure. The one thing to pay attention to, Justin, before they go into these Section 6 openers, even if they're early openers, the unions are going to survey their membership pretty heavily. And they'll get a pretty good flavor for where everyone's head is at, and what they're looking for. Are they looking for bolstering to the retirement? There's not much left on the retirements. The IRS has limitations on what can be saved and what can't. We're now in the mega backdoor Roth areas because pilots are making so much money. So there's not much left there. Lifetime medical for the surviving spouse. You're going to start seeing some things that are kind of expensive that maybe people go for, but the unions are going to know, because they're going to poll pretty extensively and say, okay, what do you guys want? And so we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what they go for.
And my last question, it kind of piggybacks off this, but it seemed like during the last negotiations, once Delta came out with what they had, it seemed to just be a race of, we have to be the same, if not a little bit better. Mm-hmm. That's not historically always the case, right? A lot of times, management's like, let's get them the crappiest deal that they can say yes to, like 50+1. Let's sign them up for whatever.
Right.
How long do you think we're going to be in a scenario or in kind of this era where airlines want to have the best pay, they want to have the best quality of life, they want to have the best whatever it may be, so that they can get more pilots?
Yeah. So what you're talking about, the union calls pattern bargaining. That's in our playbook. we as someone that's negotiated pay rates at a regional, I can tell you this is back when this is how old I am. I was when Comair existed. I was at American Eagle. It's now known as Envoy. When the 145s, the scope buster got the 140s, the scope busters got introduced. They were just below the cap that the American pilots would allow. When those got introduced, we had to negotiate a pay rate. We absolutely patterned it off of Comair at the time. We went for Comair plus 1%. Because it puts management in a difficult situation. They have to either say, we're unwilling to pay you that, even though someone else has, or we don't manage as well as the others. They're somehow still say profitable, but we haven't. So anyway, so that was actually something that we argued. The other thing is when a company claims an inability to pay at the negotiating table, they typically then invite the union. They typically during the process have to demonstrate that by opening their books. And a lot of companies don't like to do that. And so it's a real complex dance on this pattern bargaining. But the overall philosophy is exactly that. You do try to pattern. It's an incremental change. But if Delta gets something, then United is going to try to get that plus a little more. Then American's going to try to get that plus a little more. And you're going to absolutely see that. It's called pattern bargaining, and it's absolutely in our playbook.
Yeah. Do you think that for the next foreseeable future, we're going to keep seeing where airlines want to be the ones that pay the most?
I do. About pay is a slightly different question. Where
overall compensation.
Yeah. So where you're gonna see it is in like very nuanced things. Like for instance, profit sharing. Profit sharing's become a really big deal at a lot of the legacy carriers. At Delta, it can be pretty substantial. I mean, we're talking, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 checks.
More.
If not more, that line pilots are receiving, and it's part of the profit sharing thing. United, for instance, also has profit sharing, and it has a very similar formula, but for some reason, a little less money makes it than if their Delta counterparts, pro rata. And so the question then becomes, where you're going to start maybe seeing some stuff is tweaking that, cleaning up, little things. What did we miss in the last contract? When my wife flies, she's like, doggone it, I guess they can do this. I'm surprised. I'm like, when you do your survey, put that down. This is something that can be cleaned up. PBS, the PBS system, they just did a big upgrade at United, I hear, that to do the bidding there. But it's still, some people say it's still not as good as what some of the other airlines have. So these are all things. One classic example of PBS, and I've been after this for years for the airlines. I don't know what it's like at all airlines, but I know at even some of the legacies, when you put your bid in, it can take like a week or 10 days sometimes to get the results. That doesn't need to happen. That the company just simply has to, that's based on 1980s cluster technology and 1990s. They could speed that up. And so these are going to be some of the improvements, I think, because that's a big quality of life issue. If you know your schedule for the next month a week earlier than what you used to know it, that means you can plan vacations, you can plan weddings, you can plan, you're going to know things a lot more. That's a big quality of life improvement. So those are going to be some of the things I think you're going to start seeing.
Yeah. Well, Jim, hey, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Sorry I went over a little bit on your time limit,
okay.
But we appreciate you, and Aviation appreciates you, and looking forward to doing this again. We should do it again a little bit sooner than a couple months that it's been. But I'll see you soon.
Love to be here every time. Thanks for having me, Justin.